So my name is Ariel, and I am tuning in from Secwepemcúĺecw, Secwepemc territory. I am a settler here originally from Scottish Gaelic descent and Polish German. And I'm really honored to be in Secwepemc, where I am currently living. And Secwepemc means where the rivers meet. It is where the colonially known North Thompson and South Thompson River comes together. And it is a beautiful area. I'm so lucky to live here. And it's also the site of where the where the TMX drill site is located. And it was pretty horrible today to go to the land and see the desecration of the land that's taking place at this moment. And that is why we're all gathered here today, to learn a little bit about what is taking place in Secwepemcúĺecw, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and to hear a little bit more about Secwepemc Law and how Secwepemc Law exists and is alive and is being enacted at this time to fight the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So with that, we're going to do a quick round of introductions, and I will pass it off to Mike McKenzie first to share a little bit about who he is and where he's located.
My name is Mike McKenzie White. I come from the Secwepemc Nation. I'm coming to you right now from the Silk Nation. I've been working on this a long time, and I could say a whole bunch, so I'm just going to wait. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. And Miranda.
I'm coming from my home out here near Nisconlith, Skeetchestn area. And so, yeah, thanks for coming. Huksha.
Thanks, Miranda. And Romley.
Hi, I'm Romley Cavanaugh, and I'm calling in from so-called Vancouver on the lands of the Coast Salish peoples, the unceded traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish people. And I'm very grateful to be a guest here as part of the settler community, and honored to be standing with the Indigenous people fighting against the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. So I'm a former Trans Mountain environmental engineer, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what I learned working there and why I've been arrested 3 times fighting against this pipeline project. So welcome, everybody. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Romley. And I just want to give a big shout out to Heather, who is behind the scenes right now, helping out with our technical, hopefully no difficulties, but she's here to give us a hand. So thank you, Heather, for all your help. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, please do let us know. You can pop it in the chat if you are tuned in on Zoom right now, or you can pop it in the comments if you're watching on the Secwepemc page. And yeah, we'll have a chance. Everyone's going to get each of our speakers is going to have some time to share a little bit about who they are and their background and what they're speaking on today. And then we'll have an opportunity to get to questions afterwards. So please save your questions until the end. If you have a burning question, just pop it in there and we'll try to find it. It's just if it gets lost in the comments, it might be a little bit harder. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'm going to be facilitating this evening, so please do bear with us as we do this for the very first time.
Could you get me my charge cord for my phone? Thank you.
So first off, tonight we're going to have Romley speak a little bit about her experience working on working for Trans Mountain, and I will pass it off to you, Romley, to get us off.
Okay, sounds great. So yeah, I started working with Trans Mountain Pipeline when I was just 3 years out of university. I didn't really understand that much about climate change at that time. That was in the early 90s. And I had some reservations about working there because the Exxon Valdez spill had already happened up in Alaska. And so I wasn't really sure if it was a company that I wanted to work for, but I was headhunted to work there, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a try, and just see if we can make this company as green as possible. The trouble with that is there's no way to make a dirty industry clean inside of what Justin Trudeau might say about it and what the oil and gas industry might say about it. It's just impossible. So it became a very demoralizing place to work as an environmentalist. And eventually I left and started my own consulting company. But in the years since then, I've watched the government really do very little in terms of action around climate change, in terms of acknowledging Indigenous sovereignty, their rights and title. It just appears to be business as usual in spite of what happens around the world with various different environmental issues. So I got to a point where I just really realized it was time to take bold action. And that was what I did starting in the beginning of 2018. So I'm going to show you guys a presentation that will probably explain to you why I felt that was necessary. And I've got some slides about the construction, about climate change, and so on. So I'm just going to share my screen with you, just a second. So I'm hoping that you can see a slideshow. All right. Is that showing up? Miranda? Yes? No? Yeah? Okay, great. So thank you to the organizers for tonight's event. I really appreciate the effort that's been put into getting this together for us, and I'm honored to be asked to speak with you guys today. So the construction that's planned as part of the Trans Mountain expansion is 1,100 kilometers of disturbance. So if you have a 60-meter swath of land that's being impacted, then it's approximately 15,000 football fields worth of disturbance. So you can see here the pipeline in the trench, lots of pieces of heavy equipment, a lot of crew, and they basically have cleared away the forest here. So once that forest comes down, they will not allow it to regrow. They want to be able to see everything that's happening on the pipe. If there's been a landslide, if anyone is excavating on the pipe, or if there's any danger to it. So basically, this disturbance is going to go everywhere from Edmonton right down to Vancouver. So it goes through the Rocky Mountains, it goes through Jasper, Kamloops, Hope, all the way down to Vancouver. And throughout that pipeline route, it's crossing literally hundreds of creeks and rivers. It's going through people's backyards. It's going behind schools.
Sorry, Romilly. I'm just going to interrupt you. It sounds like there's a piece of paper near your microphone that might be. Do you have paper somewhere?
Oh no, maybe it's just my shirt. Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Great, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thanks for letting me know. It must be rubbing against my collar. Yeah, so basically, it's crossing hundreds of water bodies, creeks and rivers, any one of which, if they had a spill there, would be a major disaster. It's going through primarily unceded Indigenous territory as well. So I can tell you from working with the pipeline company, they're really not concerned about those issues at all. So one of the things that the oil and gas industry will tell people, and certainly Trudeau is boosting this as well, is that they've got technology to deal with spills into the ocean or spills into rivers, and that's just not the case. So almost nothing has changed in terms of the technology that they used back in the 90s. And this is an image that shows you a skimming boat and the boom that's being dragged behind it. And this is the equipment that they're using to try to recapture this massive spill that happened in the Prince William Strait up in Alaska. And all this equipment is really ineffective. So there is no way to contain a spill once this kind of accident happens. Within the industry, if they can get back 10% of what's been spilled, that's considered to be a success, which is pretty shocking. So if we look at the impacts from what happened with the Exxon Valdez back in 1988, 2,100 kilometers of shoreline were contaminated. So this is basically what it looks like. The reason that there is such a huge area of impact is because the oil gets transported by the wind, it moves with the tide, and it travels with currents. So once it's out of the tanker, it just ends up going everywhere. So the impacts from this spill that happened was 250,000 seabirds were killed. They're super vulnerable because they land on the oil on the surface and it gets into their feathers and they can't take off again. So they're basically stuck there once they land on it. Billions of salmon and herring eggs were smothered. These fisheries have never fully recovered from the impact. So Mother Nature can handle a lot of hits, but she can't deal with everything. And it can take a very long period of time, decades or hundreds of years to recover if she ever does. And in the meantime, you have all kinds of species that can go extinct. In the case of the orcas that were impacted, the pod that was hit is not able to reproduce now. So you can have 10, 20, 30 individuals, but if there aren't any surviving females of reproductive age, the pod will go extinct. And that's what's happening in this case. They have females, but they're too old, and the rest are young males or older males. So in addition to the orcas that were killed during the spill, there were a total of 3,100 marine mammals that were affected. So that includes seals and sea lions and so on. With the Exxon Valdez, if you go to the shoreline now, you can go to places where if you turn over a rock, it'll smell like a gas station. Like the oil just does not break down quickly when it's underneath, either underwater or under rocks. So this is a very beautiful video that National Geographic put together. I won't play it for you guys now because just in the interest of time, but we will share this slideshow with people who are interested in looking at it later. And it's very, very beautiful. And it talks about the fact that these killer whales 26 years later have not recovered from the hit of that spill. So the oil and gas industry will say we've got state-of-the-art technology. The Exxon Valdez is from decades ago. Everything is great now, not to worry, because they really push to try to minimize the public's understanding of what the risks are and try to boost this idea that they're creating jobs. The reality is that we don't need to have that trade-off between protecting the environment and protecting Indigenous rights versus having jobs. But because the oil and gas industry has captured our government, they're basically calling the shots for Justin Trudeau. They're calling the shots for the Premier of BC, the Premier of Alberta. That's really what this issue is about. But what they'll do is they'll promote job creation, they'll promote dollars coming from taxes, but they don't want the public to ever think about the risks. And what they do is they externalize those risks. They put them on the public, they put them on Indigenous people, they put them on the environment. And instead, they capture the profits. They capture our tax dollars in terms of subsidies. They capture the money that they can generate through putting oil through the pipeline, and they hope that other industries don't push back. But the reality is they're endangering fisheries industries, tourism industries, other types of ways that people make a living. Even agriculture can get affected by this. So this happened in 2010 in Michigan. There was a spill from a pipeline into the Kalamazoo River, very similar to what would be carried through the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's diluted bitumen from the tar sands, exactly the same as what they want to put through the TMX. They spilled over 4 million liters into the river, and it took Enbridge Pipeline 18 hours to even figure out that they were having a spill. The only way they realized was a utility worker, like a BC Hydro type of worker, called them up and said, there's oil in this river. This is in spite of the fact that the pipeline is being continuously monitored. So they have a control center that shows the pressure in the pipeline, which valves are opened or closed, the height of oil in tanks when they're filling or when they're emptying them. They know exactly, or they're supposed to know exactly what's happening all throughout the pipeline system. But in this case, a spill started to occur, the alarm would have gone off, and the people in the control center ignored it. They thought there's no way for the pipeline to have zero pressure. because that just never happens. Well, it does, because if you look over here, this is what happened with the pipe. There's a 6-foot long rupture where the pipe broke open. So there's a plastic-like coating on the pipe, which had for some reason peeled off, and then the pipe started to corrode and it eventually just exploded. So 56 kilometers of this river were contaminated. This could easily happen in some place like the Fraser River, the Coquihalla, the Clearwater, the Fraser, the Athabasca. All of those rivers are crossed by the TMX project. So what they do, because the oil from the tar sands is so heavy, is they then have to set up these floats with excavators and literally dig the oil off the bottom of the river. So there's huge disturbance to the river when they do this, and to the fish. If they have spawning grounds here, they're basically digging them up. So this is what happens when the oil sinks to the bottom of the river. This is someone trying to clean up oil off the surface of the river with a skimming machine. This is super dangerous for him as well. He doesn't even have a respirator on. So this is what they call state-of-the-art cleanup right here. And then what they will do is they will show images like this to the public, which is a wildlife rescue person cleaning oil out of this poor little turtle and trying to save him from dying from the toxins. The trouble is almost all of the animals that get affected like this are going to die, because once the oil hits their skin or goes down into their mouths, it's so poisonous that they basically die through impacts to their digestive system. So this is something you'll see in the news, but it's really just kind of a fallacy. So over here, you'll see no fishing, no swimming, no boating. This river is closed until further notice due to ongoing spill response. So this was a massive disaster that happened just 10 years ago. This is what we're fighting to prevent. Oops. So they'll say, well, spills hardly ever happen. The thing is, they do happen, and they happen often. They happen, small spills happen all the time on the Trans Mountain Pipeline. They had a spill on the very first day they started operating. And they'll say, well, they hardly ever happen, but my job there was to clean up spills. So that's just not the case. Luckily, massive spills like the Exxon Valdez and the Kalamazoo hardly ever happen, but those risks still exist. But if we were to say, okay, they don't happen that often, thankfully, there's still this issue of climate change, which if we continue to build fossil fuel infrastructure is never going to get addressed. We're at a place with climate change that we should be stopping all future fossil fuel extraction projects and starting to wind our way out of this process and shift over to renewable energy as soon as possible. Time is ticking. We're down to the 11th hour. They're saying we have 9 years left to deal with this. And yet Trudeau goes, well, that's okay. We can build this other pipeline. So it's ridiculous, the kind of rationale that he's using for this. But okay, let's say spills hardly ever happen, but let's look at the impacts of climate change. We're seeing droughts and crop failures, flooding, forest fires. It's estimated that 1 billion animals died in Australia from the fires there. We've also seen massive fires on Turtle Island recently as well. The polar ice caps are melting. We have extreme temperatures where people can't even survive in the environments that they used to be able to live in, which is causing forced migration of people, geopolitical unrest. And this is going to continue to get worse and worse. And yet Trudeau thinks this pipeline's a great idea. It's like really unfathomable how he came up with that, other than to say that his cronies told him to say that. And so that's what he's doing. Ecosystem degradation, species extinctions, over 1 million species are anticipated to go extinct from climate change. So none of this is happy news. I'm sure none of this is even new to the people who are on the line today, but what really needs to happen is for us to be shifting over to a whole new way of living. First of all, living in balance with nature, also living with huge respect for Indigenous people and their sovereignty, especially given that they've lived in balance with nature on Turtle Island for millennia. We have so much to learn from the Indigenous people who are leading this fight. but there's just so many better ways to live at this point. And so if you look at Forbes, which is a very business oriented publication, this is certainly not a publication that's coming from environmentalists. This is an article that came out this year saying just how good an investment is renewable energy. The new study reveals all. Well, this is what it reveals. Renewable energy investments are delivering massively better returns than fossil fuel projects in the United States, the UK, and Europe. So Justin Trudeau really can't even make an argument that this pipeline makes any sense financially. The whole thing is really being driven by the oil and gas industry, plain and simple. That's it. So this is me with the very lovely hereditary chief's office at a pipeline protest back in October. And my call out to everybody is please come and join us. We need people to fight for Mother Earth. We need people to stand in solidarity with Indigenous people who are leading this fight. And I need to say arrests are not required. Getting arrested is a very, very personal decision and certainly not one that I took lightly. But there's so many ways to support this cause, and it's really so important for the future generations, even for our own health and safety now. So I encourage you to participate, come out to actions. You certainly don't have to get arrested. Post on Facebook, talk to your friends, send donations, whatever you feel comfortable doing. I really encourage you to join us in this fight. I'm super happy that I'm a part of it, and I'm going to just keep fighting until they finally give up on this project. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one. I'm in very good company. So thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Romley. That was
Thank you.
really insightful, and it definitely a good reminder the cumulative impacts of climate change. And even if there's just a small spill, it's that ocean of small spills of
Exactly.
When we were camped out at Skeetchestn, just being adjacent to the Domtar pulp mill and like thinking about all of the fumes that are being let go 24/7 from just that one mill there, and how that's impacting the air that we breathe. It's easy to see how many the cumulative impacts of all of these projects.
Exactly.
And we already see what it's doing to the salmon. We already see what it's doing to our forests. We already see what it's doing to our air quality. So thank you for that reminder. And the other thing that really stood out to me as well in your speech was the part where you talked about how often when we see a spill, all we see are these sort of greenwashing images of people saving the turtles and saving the birds, and how the true full story is often never quite as publicized in the mainstream media. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. There was even talk amongst the wildlife rescue people that those animals that are impacted should just be euthanized because their chance of surviving is so low, and they're terrified that people are handling them and trying to take them into these centers to clean them up. They don't know that someone wants to help them. They think they're going to go into a pot of soup, so it's this horrifying experience for them, and their chance of surviving is so low. But that's the kind of stuff that you'll see in the news because the industry is trying to greenwash, like you said, and make it sound like they're really doing something fabulous. But there's like thousands of animals that were impacted in the Gulf of Mexico as well with that spill that happened recently. So they're just super vulnerable, and the risks are really, really high. It's just not worth it.
And you were at the Secwépemcúĺecw, the crossing, the Thompson River, where the 2 drill sites were held. That was where your photo had been taken place. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience is in that area, specifically what you could imagine might happen along the sandy shores of Skeetchestn there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would be very much something like the Kalamazoo, where some of the oil will stay on the surface and then it spreads along the river and it coats the riverbanks. And then some of it will sink down to the bottom, and they have to try and clean it up with those excavators. But any wildlife along, like with the Kalamazoo, 56 kilometers of river was impacted. Any wildlife along there is probably going to perish. The fish, the birds, if there's turtles, if there's salamanders, their chance of survival is so low. It's really, really sad. And the salmon are already really struggling with climate change and with overfishing and these other pressures that they are already trying to deal with. So you're looking at a very high likelihood of the orcas going extinct if there were a spill in the Salish Sea, a very high likelihood of fish species going extinct in those rivers as well. And so many of them are at risk. Those are really big rivers, the Athabasca, the Thompson, the Coquihalla. Once it gets in there, like the thought of that when I worked there was so horrifying because it would have just left a place like Hope and gone all the way to Vancouver. There's no way to stop it once it starts running in the river. So yeah, my message to people is just don't believe the lies coming from the Trudeau government or the Horgan government about the safety of these projects. It's just not true. So
Yeah, we're all connected by these waterways, hey?
exactly. And they're so beautiful. It's not worth it. In fact, they should be getting rid of the pipeline they already have, not building another one. So yeah, there's so many better ways of doing what we should be doing now.
Totally. Well, thank you, Romley. And
Yeah, you're very welcome.
watching wants to show Romley some love in the group chat or on the live stream, and we'll have a chance to ask some additional questions to Romley at the end. But next, we're going to hear from Mike,
Sounds great.
who's going to tell us a little bit about Secwepemc Law and the role of Secwepemc Law in all of this. Off to you, Michael.
Hello. Sorry, I turned myself off and then back on. Secwepemc again to everybody. Welcome. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been involved in throughout my life and a little bit about some of the work that I've done around Secwepemc Law. It's a hard topic to talk about because the first thing that I often have to talk about, and I like to get it off the way right away, is what is the topic of genocide? And the hardest thing that we deal with right now as Indigenous peoples is that at least for over 100 years, they've been trying to wipe our people out. And so I talk about that first. I want to get that off the way. Because once we talk about Secwepemc Law, we talk about a nation of people. We talk about people who come from a distinct area in the world. We're talking about a people who basically, in some of my recent understanding, this is one of the newest colonies in the world, is British Columbia. You know, Canada, they celebrated their 150th, and BC only at the time celebrated about 136 years. And something about this is, for my dad, he was out there on the land when he was a young man, and he can remember time when there was barely anybody in this province. So I want to bring it right into context from the beginning that I'm not talking about an old law. I'm talking about something that's very, very fresh. And I'm just trying to think, what is the best way to explain Secwepemc Law is to explain our relationship with one another, with our mother, with our father, with our cousins, with brothers and sisters and siblings, and within our family. And so you've got to bring that understanding to what I'm about to say. When they talk about Secwepemc laws, it's different from what Canada has as Secwepemc laws. Secwepemc law to Canada is self-government and reconciliation. And obviously we're talking here tonight because none of that's actually happening for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So I grew up in the Skeetchestn community, which is just west of Kamloops. I lived there for my whole life. And I basically grew up on the land with my dad, and I grew up in the city with my mom. My mom took me to the city. My dad took me to the city too, but I had two distinct lives. I had my city life where I had, from time to time, I did different things in the city. like going to courses in school and different extracurricular activities. And then I had my Skeetchestn life, which was no cell service, not very much internet. If maybe 500 megabytes a day is what we had 10 years ago. And still the internet is quite like that on my reserve. And this is the thing, is two different worlds we live in. And so my dad grew up in a world with none of the city things that I had. And growing up in that life, you have to apply modern day knowledge to those laws. I'm saying this because we're going to get into it. The most important thing for us to really get down to is the way that Secwepemc law is understood in the context of a court, or in the context of a country, or in the context of a sovereign. Because in Canada, they have what they call is a fiduciary relationship with Aboriginal peoples. And this is going to be backwards on my screen, but this is, I just want to show you, there is a real document that comes from the Library of Parliament, and they know all about their fiduciary relationship with Aboriginal peoples, it says. And the thing about this is that in 1763, it breaks this down. The Queen, which would have been a king at the time, made a proclamation under the Crown that nothing west of the Appalachian Mountains would be colonized by the Crown without consent of Indigenous peoples. This is where Secwepemc law may have been first recognized by the Crown. The understanding that there was a distinct people that shouldn't be colonized in the West. And so there's many of us. There's more than just the Secwepemc people. There's many other nations in the West, and all of us have been impacted by this. And so you fast forward now to my dad's generation and my generation. Residential schools had a very severe impact on our territory. And smallpox disease had a very severe impact on our territory. And basically, anything you can think of, from healthcare to legal to education, was undermined by the government. And they already know this. This is what they call reconciliation. And when the government gets into a position to do something like that, in international law, they have to reconcile, or they're committing genocide. And that's why I talk about genocide right from the start. So it's in your mind and everybody knows this before I just drop it on people. Some people are really offended by that term. I'm not trying to take away the importance or the severity of other genocides that have happened in this world. And so I just want to acknowledge that. Genocide today is what you see on the pipeline. And it's directly relatable to Secwepemc law. Now I'll explain a little bit about Secwepemc law. The government of Canada has their laws, the Secwepemc people has their language and their protocols and the way that they did things. In the way that they did things, in their language and in their worldviews, in their protocols, there were laws. I say the highest laws that we have as Secwepemc people are in our prayers. Protect all the animals, protect the world, protect everything on this planet, protect each other, take care of each other. Thank you for our blood, thank you for our heart. But then these teachings are also directly relatable to our rivers and to our mountains. And some Secwepemc words and some words in other Indigenous languages, they mean the exact same thing. For example, where two rivers meet and where the blood pumps in the heart and where it mixes. And so when you have an understanding of these laws, when you have an understanding of how we come to law as Indigenous peoples, It's not just in our prayer. I would say prayer is a colonial word. So it's in what we say and what we do. And Indigenous peoples had practices on the land, Secwepemc people specifically. Our hereditary peoples today are taking on those roles. One of the highest laws that we have is the law of Yuchmeets. And it's said in a lot of different ways. We have several different dialects in the Shuswap Nation, but it basically means to look after one another, but also to look after the earth, because the earth's survival, because your survival depends on the earth's survival. It's a complicated process to translate our laws because a lot of our words don't have an English translation. But what I'm going to do right here, I'm going to just pop off the screen and I'm going to show just a couple of things. So we have in our laws, for example, the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council as a society under the BC Societies Act has put together different kind of material. And this material is, I'm just showing you right here. So you can see me, I got my lights on, but I really want you to see this. This is not in paper form, it's not copyable, there's no copies of this. But this is work where basically our chiefs and some of our peoples, they've also done work around Secwepemc laws. And they did this at the Indigenous Law Research Unit with the University of Victoria. And so we have all kinds of resources available for the Secwepemc, exactly how to break down our laws. But the majority of our laws have been broken down based on understandings to our relationship to each other and to the land. And it's fundamental because as Indigenous peoples, we get our authority from the land. And we get that authority from our blood. We also get that authority from our life. That basically, when we're living together happy, you see our people were moving around on the Secwepemc Nation. Everybody was living happy and in harmony. And what a joy it would be to know what those people lived through. And we have all of these systems in place. Very intelligent people, very experts in their own field. And I bring attention to that document. I deliberately bring attention to that document. I don't want that document to be copied. I can only share that document among my peers, and then I get permission from my elders what I can share. A lot of our knowledge is sacred, and our people, they don't like to share a lot of our knowledge. And so we have knowledge about our stories. We have stories on the land, and they tell us about our laws as well. Directly related to that area right above the Kamloops Thompson River, Secwepemcúĺecw, the water, right above all of that is a place called Skeetchestn. And growing up in Skeetchestn, I got to be part of a really amazing process. It was one of the first of its kind in the world. And it took place over decades. It wasn't just my work, it was a lot of people's work. And they did this, they brought together the laws through the Indigenous Law Research Unit. They brought together the laws through the language. They brought together laws through old recordings of our people. And over the period of 20 years, it was unsure whether or not they would be able to uphold these laws. The federal government did not allow anything to do with this. Most people fight when it comes to our rights, and I hate to say that. Most people have to fight. They fight in court for a very long time. They fight. When I say fight, I say that because some of these people are fighting for their life, whether they're holding a sign on the side of the road or they're at the Parliament buildings. So my life really took off in the fight in 2010. And 2010, I was a firefighter. I became the youngest fire chief in my community, probably in Canada at the time, I'm not sure. And then across Canada over the next 4 years, I became the local, provincial, and national youth representative through my role as a Secwepemc youth representative at the Secwepemc Nation Tribal Council. There's going to be a lot of words here. This was all under Stephen Harper, of course, so it was an incredibly different time. I know what it's like to fight and fight and fight, and you don't get anywhere, and nobody's talking about reconciliation, and they're mocking your art, and they're mocking your people. And a lot of these people were in bureaucracy, so you have to understand a lot of these people are still there. They're still in those positions working for this government. And but moving along, 4 years of representing youth across Canada, I went to the Northwest Territories, I went to Quebec, I went just about everywhere you could go. I mean, it's a story for a whole nother time because I could talk about it for days and I don't want to do that. But I got some really amazing experiences. I got to meet the national chief. I got to meet national youth representatives from around the world. I got to work with the national chief and regional chiefs, and I got to be on TV. But one of the things they don't tell you when you're a youth representative is you're pretty much just about a token in everything that you do. You're the rubber stamp process that says Indigenous youth were involved, and you basically work for the government because if you don't fit the role, they've got a lot of influence to make sure you don't have one. Fortunate for me, 6 years I went at it until in 2016, I finally resigned from the Secwepemc Nation Tribal Council and I resigned from everything. But it wasn't at a crazy time. It was at the exact same time that we finished our laws work, that we were doing big things. And this jumps around a little bit, so let's keep up, but we'll get to the bottom of this. 2015, the Secwepemc finally were sitting at the table with a Trudeau government that was talking about reconciliation. And I want to talk about this for just a second because we went into this process with the government. We called it the KGHM Ajax process as a community. We went into this process and it was my job to bring all of the family heads together. And so I had the awesome job of going out into the community and spending weeks with the people in my community and just establishing family head systems that were over 100 years ago, were probably the last time they were really intact. And we still have family heads in our nation and hereditaries in our nation, of course, but the system's a lot more broken down now and entire communities can't come together now to assert that jurisdiction. Back to what I said at the beginning with the Royal Proclamation of 1763, Canada shouldn't be here. We've established this. Everybody knows this. We talk about it in everything that we do. We're on the unceded territories of the Syilx. We're on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. We're on the unceded territories of the Secwepemc. We're on the unceded territories of the Tsilhqot'in, And that is law. That is law. And our hereditary matriarch here today is going to talk to you a little bit about her role in that law. We have that system in place, but forgive us if it's not robust and world class, because Trudeau just announced reconciliation and wants to hammer a pipeline down our throat in a matter of minutes. No, no, no. We need 20 years or so. In 2015 and 16, we completed that process. We reviewed the mine, we reviewed our laws, the family heads came together in my community, but we don't have the title and the jurisdiction for the entire nation. We're just caretakers of our area. And so at Peepsith, right above where Miranda's been and where everybody's been in Kamloops, and right there at Peepsith is the home of one of our proven laws. Proven. The government of Canada rejected the KGHM Ajax mine, a multi-billion-dollar company, in the name of, they blurred it. They put it a few different points. They put it in a lot of stack of paper and press releases. And if you look it up, it'll be hard to figure out exactly why they denied it. But every level of government knows that we did a process based on free, prior, and informed consent. And that's Secwepemc law. That we did it. We got out on the land. We made a declaration. We said what we were going to do. We gathered the families. We reviewed the 18,000-page proposal. We deliberated as a community for over 9 months almost. And then we delivered a decision that no to Ajax, no forever, and yes to a healthy environment. This is important because I'm going to end with this. I mean, we could talk about Secwepemc law all day long. I'd love to talk about Secwepemc law all day long. I think everything that I said is the crash course on Secwepemc law. You need to know about the Royal Proclamation of 1763. You need to know the Crown's understanding of law. They understand that we're a peoples. Genocide is a serious crime in this world that we live in. So they either have to follow Secwepemc law or they are committing genocide. This is a touchy subject, but what they've done to these women on the pipeline already amounts to genocide. So Canada has some reckoning to do, and we as peoples, as citizens of wherever we come from, we have a duty. They found this in the Nuremberg trials. And if you don't know what that is, just look up genocide in the Nuremberg trials. It's really important to know. But they found this in the Nuremberg trials where they defined genocide. They found this, that it is on the moral responsibility is on the individual. So everybody who's out there, all the RCMP officers, every single person who is out there, and I really thank our friend, our champion for being here tonight, a former engineer. You know, like, how amazing, because you know what you've done is you stood on the right side of history, and I just have to thank you, because that's what the Nuremberg trials say, is it's up to the individual to decide whether this is right or wrong, whether or not we're committing genocide against a people. Of course, though, I'll bring it back down. I'm going to finish, and I'm just going to say it's not everybody's fault. I would imagine the majority of us on this webinar tonight and in the future understand that we are doing our best. We also understand personally if we're not doing our best. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings tonight with what I said. Secwepemc law is in our languages. It's in the way that we relate to one another. And I talked a bit about it tonight. I'd love to talk a bit more in the future, but I just want to show this, and it doesn't matter if it's backwards on this. This is just a satellite image of sagebrush and grasslands. but you can see the giant pink line on it. And that pink line is the pipeline. And what I'm holding up here is I'm holding up the exact map. I'm holding up the exact map for the pipeline to go through the area that we shut down a multi-billion-dollar mining company with our laws. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but I'm pretty sure KGHM Ajax should be upset that they had to go through this process and Trudeau just skipped over our family head. They skipped over Trudeau skipped over our family systems. He skipped over our Secwepemc laws. He skipped over all of it. We were on day 3 of our panel of the mine, and that was when the National Energy Board handed us the file. It wasn't private information. Everybody was talking about it. We were going to review the pipeline. And just as fast as I folded up that paper, it was gone. And it's really hard to do this work. Trust me. I have commend everybody. I'm sure there's more activists on here that are doing work around the world. And, I really appreciate the work everybody is doing. I've been exhausted myself. People are exhausted, and we're going to learn. We're going to figure this out together. And Secwepemc law isn't, we don't have a great big book somewhere. I'm sorry. We don't have a book. It's not written. It's not sitting somewhere intact where everybody can understand it, because if it was, there wouldn't even be a province here, right? So I guess we still have work to do, but this is the work we've done so far, and I don't take credit for this work. I've just been a part of it. So thank you. Ariel?
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing your truth, the really real emotion, the exhaustion, and that I can't imagine how incredibly exciting it was to have won the Dex Mine case. I remember being in Victoria at the time in Wasanich and Lekwungen territory, and hearing about that epic win and how, I remember sitting around my desk with my coworkers just being like, how did that happen? What was the reason for that? And I remember somebody saying it's because of the incredible organizing efforts of the people who live in Secwepemc territory. And that was about all I got in terms of insight of what had actually taken place. So thank you so much for sharing that, how Secwepemc Law was used in that case to actually defeat that mega project, that mining project, and sharing a little bit more about Pipsith and the cultural significance of that area, and showing us that it is possible to do this and to win these cases. And it's going to be a lot of really hard work, but I'm really excited about what the history and what the past has taught us, and how we can move forward in that.
I guess I won't take up any more of your time, everybody, but I'm just going to clarify. Pipsith is a very important area, but the whole nation is Pipsith. I mean, we were just fortunate in that spot because we were able to do a site-specific claim, and everything was site-specific. And we were fortunate to be able to defeat such a company because it was site-specific. But with that being said, I guess the precedent is there now on that site that the pipeline shouldn't even be digging dirt. We didn't let them drill. They weren't allowed to drill in the lake. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's a really important area, but the whole nation is like that. We don't have the manpower.
Yeah, we really do need to all work together. And I think it's really interesting as well. I mean, enough of me talking. I would really love to hear what our audience has to say. And what stood out to you guys while you were listening, sorry, you folks, while you were listening to Michael's presentation. So I know there's a bit of a lag on Facebook, but if anyone wants to pop in the chat or in the Facebook comments, what really stood out to you when you were listening to Michael, that would be really lovely to see. And yeah, just to think about land degradation and how the Trans Mountain Pipeline has, I believe, 67 archaeological sites at risk because of the pipeline, and how important that site-specific history and that evidence for cultural significance under colonial law really is for setting precedent to Indigenous relations to the land, and how we have this colonial law running parallel to Secwepemc. And I think colonial law is being very contractual and very written, and how that's very different from the relationship-based law and the language-based law and the spirituality, the prayer-based law, the Secwepemcúĺecw, that exists in Secwepemcúĺecw. And so, yeah, thank you for showing us a little bit more about what that means, and enlightening us a little bit. And yeah, I'm sure you could talk forever about that. There's so much to learn.
I seen a question there. Someone asked how they would learn as a settler about this.
Oh, it's a little different. I can't hear you anymore, Michael. Sorry.
I see a question there. Settler, they want to know how settlers could learn this in a good way more. Mm-hmm. And I think just to touch on that, you just gotta, in terms of what I was talking about, Peepsith, we actually, it's all public. So if you have the time and you want to, you can go into open government, you can Google it all, and you can look under SSN, KGHM Ajax Mine, and you'll find a lot of resources that we poured on the internet throughout that entire process. We talked about our laws, we talked about why people weren't allowed to touch the lake. We talked about why people weren't allowed to talk to us the way that they did. We talked about why we put an entire portion of our assessment was on integrity. We didn't just assess the environment. And so all that's there. And I'm sure more of us would be happy to share. Any one of us would be happy to share again. And maybe there'll be more times to share like this in the future, but this is a good start.
Awesome, yeah. And we'd be happy to share that link to that page that you were just talking about, Michael. We can send it to those who registered for the webinar, and we can also post it on the Facebook page for folks who want to do a little bit of their own research as well. So thank you, Michael. We're going to wrap it up there for your portion of the webinar. And last but certainly not least, we have Miranda Dick, hereditary matriarch in Secwepemc territory, who's been holding the line here at Skeetchestn at the central shores of the Secwepemcúĺecw. And she's going to talk a little bit about what land occupation and land defense looks like in terms of the enactment of Secwepemc law. So we'll pass it over to you, Miranda. No, there you are. Perfect. All right.
Liked. Yeah, I wanted to talk on Secwepemcúĺecw and what the work we've been doing so far. We've done a lot of ceremonies. We've held numerous, just endless ceremony portions. So there we've had pipe ceremonies. We've had a peyote ceremony. We've had a canoe journey. We've had endless gatherings there. We've had a salmon gathering, almost all either organized by the youth or through our elders' guidance. We've done so many ceremonies down there for water gatherings, feasting, almost anything to make sure that people know and understand that we're still here as the Secwepemc people stopping the pipeline. And so all of that work that came together through all of our organization of the Secwepemc people. And so our updates on Secwepemcúĺecw is that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is wanting to re-drill underneath the Thompson River as we speak. So we did a drive earlier this morning. Ariel put a portion of the video up, and that was to actually show what's actually going on right now on both sides of the river. So on one side is the airport side road, and then the other portion is Secwepemc, which is the sandy portion of Mission Flats area. And there they originally got the pipe stuck. And so Trans Mountain left that adjacent pipe where it is right now, and actually just went 150 feet close to that line. So where we took some of the images and pictures, they had the pipe welded together, and they were up on the big cranes on Airport Side Road. And then onto the other side is like Secwepemc, which is a sandy portion where they've actually come down Kenna Cartwright Park area, and the pipe is, getting tacked together. So that's the update as to what we've been following and going down and observing. Right now, well, due to a lot of restrictions and things like that for people, gathering and things like that, we've actually just done a lot of the work on our own. So driving out there, documenting, taking pictures, and that's where we hand that over to Romley, where she updates us on what's actually going on the ground. This is what's going on. So from that whole portion, we actually, on December 1st, we wrote a Governor General letter from my father, who's hereditary chief, and from myself. And so we actually wrote a letter talking about all of our grievances. We've actually put that up on our We the Secwepemc page, and the Secwepemc Say No to TMX. And yes, it does state the royal proclamation in there. We do state that this is the portion that was federally purchased by Canada, and how that conflict of interest is showing its very valid concern that you can't have a nation being governed by Department of Indian Affairs and then have the federal government actually issuing or asserting their own portions. So like in-source revenue sharing and all of those types of things, they're almost in a sense just a conflict of interest, because their portion that they're showing is that yes, they can issue court injunctions and then go and do promissaries for their purchase of the pipeline. So in one hand, they're showing that the Canada government is governing the Indigenous people in one way. And then in the other hand, they're saying, well, we'll starve you out if you don't sign onto the impact benefit agreements and so forth. So we just find that very just unjust, and to stand by and to witness this occurring on our territory, we have to say something. So we've wrote on behalf of the nation what we've seen, and yes, the portion of what we've witnessed, as in Canada purchasing the pipeline and then signing deals and agreements for impact benefit agreements with the signed elected chiefs, and that we've witnessed that actually occurring within our territory. And we've said no under our opposition on numerous occasions. We've said no in so many different ways. And so us asserting ourselves on the land by using ceremony for water protection ceremonies and pipe ceremonies, and actually just being immersed right into the land shows that we've been here from time immemorial. And so that was the portion of showing our valid concern to Trans Mountain Pipeline, a purchased pipe that was purchased by Canada. So then that's where we get into that portion of no jurisdiction and asserting their jurisdictional court injunctions onto the people. So that's when you see numerous arrests along the actual proposed route, and how unjust that is, because what we're talking about here, like Michael said, was genocide, and to actually prove and assert our portion to the land is by usage. And so that's where we continue to say that there's no jurisdiction. So the jurisdictional portion is that the courts just assume that they have jurisdictional portions over our people. And so it gets back to us going to court on January 20th, 2021. There will be 8 of us going in to Supreme Court in Vancouver on that date. And also my sister had gone to court, and she was later on, her portion was dropped because the courts didn't know how to handle this type of situation. Basically, they left it up to Trans Mountain to handle her portion of prosecution or jail time and that type of thing. So with my sister, she ended up getting her charges dropped, and that shows that we've gone into court and we've shown that we are still here, and we assert ourselves on the land. We're asserting ourselves within the title of the Secwepemc people. And that's where we stand on is the Shuswap Okanagan Confederacy, which is one of our oldest governing portions, where we can't sign, sell, or cede our territories because that belongs to the children. And so we don't actually talk too much about that, but that's where we still stand as the hereditary portion is actually standing and asserting ourselves as a matrilineal or as a hereditary from the Shuswap Okanagan Confederacy, and how the land then is handed down to our future generations. And so those portions that we had all talked about and put forward are valid concerns on environmental. We've talked about genocide. We've talked about all of those things. So those contractual agreements are then null and void. And so we veto those. We have the right to veto those contractual agreements. And from the people, in our understanding under the original agreements that we have with our land, with our people, go back so far back that it's not written. So we don't actually have the written record that Michael then talks about, fighting against Ajax Mine. But we had oral traditions. Now we have written forms. So we've documented a lot of our usage from the elders and asserting our title that way, that we've actually taken in a lot of the pit house and the archaeological findings, the environmental impacts that are going on, and so forth. So we have to now adopt that into our usage now. So with technology like our webinar and live streaming and so forth, we have more people interested in actually what's going on the land. And so the portion of how we've gotten to get this far and what's actually occurring to our people now, we have this displacement, we have again the murder and missing Indigenous women, impacts on not just the environment, impacts on the people in the surrounding area, and then also the animals that we're speaking for. So when we're talking about protecting clean water, we have the salmon. So the salmon come up to the Upper Adams every year, and then they go out to the ocean, go all the way up to Alaska, and then come back every year. So the importance of protecting clean water is very present everyday existence for us. So when we're thinking about protecting or going out on the land, our river just runs adjacent to us. and also the clean water that we want to protect is just so present for us in everyday usage. So when we're going out and we're doing our protection ceremonies for clean water and using our land, we have legends and stories that go along with that. And in one of our ceremonies that we had, that was what was discussed, was that that Secwépemc wouldn't let things go unbalanced. And so when we're thinking about how impacted the environment, the people, and everything in that scope of everything on just that tract of area, that the creator won't allow that to go unbalanced. And so we leave it in then the creator's hands, as in seeing how prayer can change a lot of things. And not just that, but then we have to take action. When we talk about prayer, we're not just prayer for people, we're actually doing that. So we're actually out on the land, we're using the land, we're having offerings. We give a lot of offerings out to, for our water, protection of Mother Earth and so forth. So with all of that being said, we're not just prayerful people here. We've been here for time immemorial. And so I think the Indigenous people know what's best for what's going on in our territories. And so given that chance of expression and giving that portion of care is also has to be taken into consideration, not just for impacts, but actually just for further usage. If we just actually took those heated warnings and actually applied them to nowadays environmental concerns, the environment, climate change, and so forth, then I think we'll be way better off in the near future when we've actually considered what our own people and what our actual nations have been saying for time immemorial. I think we've, we stand with many nations. My friend Billy, she actually is protecting her area, not just her, but her actual community and so forth of the large deforestation going on along the Coquihalla area. And then we get into what's going on as of just today was the Holmes Creek area where people are protecting cottonwood trees from being dismantled in their homes that were erected in protection of that area by Trans Mountain. And you see the brute force that Trans Mountain and Canada are willing to go to, and what extent, and in prosecuting the people that are protecting clean water. And so when we're asking for call out and we're asking for direct action comes in many forms. A lot of things that we've done, we've had mostly in ceremony, and so it comes right back down to then how are we using the land to protect it and so forth. So our portion of care is, we've had sacred fires, so we've had to have firewood, we've had GoFundMe's going for legal portions. We have one that's going right now for upcoming film, where we will be doing a film from the proposed areas of the Trans Mountain. So we'll be going to talk to people who haven't had their voices heard along that portion of saying no. So there's there's a lot of people who are fighting against this Trans Mountain pipeline project, but they're not being heard. And so there's many of ways of how to get involved and what to actually do, and not just we've had cooks, we've had when we've had our camp running, we had our cooks come out, we've had canoe boatmen. We've had the fishermen come out and they actually helped us get along with the canoes out to our canoe journey. And we had music, which was sponsored through artisans. And so numerous portions of how we get involved and how as not just the Secwepemc person can get involved, but how any one of our viewers could get involved in and participate. And so how we've been asking for call outs, we usually put a call out. We're doing artist builds, we're doing music, drumming and singing. We had stick games, just numerous portions of involvement. So we have a GoFundMe for the video. It's really important. I feel that there's been not that much opposition, mainly because of those mutual impact benefit agreements that I talked about. In there, it states under their liabilities portion that anyone who impedes work orders such as, Jane Doe and John Doe can be arrested. The other portion that's not talked about is how even the opposition of this pipeline portion and that mutual impact liability portion is stated in there that that membership, if their elected chiefs signed on or their council signed on with their portions, that their opposition, they would end up having to repay that money back. And the other question that we've raised many concerns about was under that mutual impact benefit portion was if a spill ever occurs. And that's really threatening to us because it doesn't really give any sense of security. Like Romilly talked about at the beginning was she showed us spills and the cleanup and how that actually the pipeline actually just puts it into perspective, like, oh, okay, we'll clean up this portion and they only get 10% of it, and then the impacts on the environment and the people and the animals that live in that surrounding area are very concerning. And so we put that actually as a question, as in who's then responsible for spill response and cleanup? Are those elected chiefs who signed on with those mutual or impact benefit agreements willing to take the large responsibility on as spill response and cleanup? And that's really valid concerns where we've actually put those towards the elected officials who signed on with that portion. So we've had many of other, the discussions leading up to that. And we even put in displacement, like we're talking about people being displaced because of their opposition to Trans Mountain. Like there's not even the discussion about how displacement is going on, because if you're not in agreement and you're Indigenous, that you will be a scapegoat, or you will be then blacklisted. You won't be able to work within your surrounding, community. You will be blacklisted for housing. Then further on displacement onto just being displaced right out of the nation. So we put forward numerous concerns, and then that displacement goes right into the murder and missing Indigenous women, and how that portion that we've actually hold then the title to the land is the women. And so when we're having major discussion, we just had a women's gathering last month, and the discussion there was the same thing. We have to consider all avenues of approach and and care for our children, the land usage, our elders, our youth, and the portion of taking care of the women was a main issue. And that's how we've come to that portion of systemic issues of violence on reservations, and not just that, but within our own territory and our own nation, where those impact benefit agreements that were signed on don't really tell the elected chiefs how to do things, but then they compose their own portion. So, you know, when we're talking about how the impacts of our own women and our own safety with not just the man camps, but with any extractive industry within our territory. We think of rural communities having more than 250 men descend onto small rural communities that have money. They have, you know, drugs. They have all of those types of things that are that go with extractive industry. And so they end up descending onto a small rural community, indigenous, you know, portion of reservation or any of those impacted areas. And so that's where we see a lot of the women going missing. And it impacts a lot of people in so many different ways. And so we've put that in our Governor General letter as well, and we'll probably update another one, and anyone could do one. We did one from the hereditary structure from my dad and myself, and address those concerns, and even address the portion of R.I.S.E that had occurred because we have questioned the jurisdictional portion. So yeah, that's pretty much the update that I wanted to give this evening. And if we have any questions, I could answer it.
Thank you, Miranda. Thank you. Well, that was really powerful. Yeah, thank you for talking about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And for anybody who hasn't read the MMIW report, that shows the evidence that's linked between man camps or temporary transient worker camps that come up around large industrial projects like the Trans Mountain Pipeline. You can actually see the evidence for yourself and hear from the people of lived experience who are continuing to live through the traumatic experience of losing a loved one. So it's a really thick report, as it should be, because there's a lot of stories to be told, and it's a hard thing to read, but we're about to tuck in here for the winter, and it's a really great opportunity to get in touch with what's actually taking place on the land. And we know that folks have already started to experience that violence. I've been seeing stories about people almost getting run off the road by, you know, big trucks and people around the TMX site. And we know, I mean, myself, you know, when we went to go take footage of the site, where security guards were encroaching in our personal space, and it's incredible, you know, while the cameras are watching, that this is the behavior that we can already see and just imagine, you know, in remote communities where, as Michael said earlier, you know, we have poor internet connections, and it's harder to hear from the people on what's actually taking place on the land. And then again, like you said, Miranda, tying back into that fear of, you know, what will happen if you share your story or if you speak out against the projects that the Band Council has signed on to. So thank you for giving us that perspective. I also really appreciated what you said about, you know, the importance of ceremony and how that is, you know, like Michael said, prayer and enactment of Secwepemc Law, and how, you know, it's evidence that we're still here, and being on the land and being in ceremony is just, you know, it's one of the most powerful things we can do. And that, you know, on the day, I don't know if folks know this, but the pipeline got stuck underneath the Thompson River. And it's delayed construction, although, you know, they've been working hard to try to get it unstuck. It sounds like it might be, they might be drilling a new hole adjacent to the existing one, and that announcement of the pipe being stuck under the river took place on the same day that we had that the Secwepemc people hosted the water ceremony. And like you said, with your legend of there always being balance, of the creator ensuring that there's balance. That, you know, that was it. That was the creator making that balance and giving the people more time to stand up and say no and take action. So thank you. Perfect. And so we'll get into questions now. Ask for the link to the index hearing documents. Yeah, we could definitely send that around. Or sorry, Michael, do you want to?
I'm just trying to find all the links now because I know some of it's available, but it looks like some of it's not. Okay, I will find it, but I'll also share a link on the Facebook webinar live post comment thread.
Definitely.
Could I say something quick about rejection too? We forgot about that, but I also was thinking about that the day that the pipe got stuck under the river is one of our Secwepemc laws of rejection, which means if you disrespect the land in that area, the land and the sky will turn on you. So it's not just about that pipeline, it's also about climate change and the way that we need to operate. So there's that. I'll share all these links somewhere and I'll make sure everybody gets them.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. All right. There's another question here from an anonymous attendee, which says, do you feel there is a specific audience that is most vital to have your message reach at this moment in time? I'll give that one to either Miranda or Michael.
I can answer that one. Well, we're asking basically for everyone who's concerned all throughout the whole area. So we don't actually have like specific people. We've called it We the Secwepemc virtual page because that was how we wanted to engage our own people. First off and foremost was, yes, to engage our own people so we could have a streaming, center where we could get videos, or we could get all of those out to everyone as fast as we could. Plus it being a virtual camp, that anyone could upload a video to the virtual page. And so, yeah, there's no specific, I believe that, protection of clean water is for everyone. And how we're going to do that is by banding together, and also, all of the usage that we have pertaining to clean water is going to be in care for everyone for the future generations. So if I care for Mother Earth in a certain way, I want everyone to care for Mother Earth in a certain way, because then it shows that we are handing over our future generations a better way of handling things. And just by having everybody taking care of that all along the whole Fraser River, and then all the way out to the ocean, and Mother Earth in general, in care of that is so important that it's not just for the Secwepemc people. Of course, I've talked about some people who have been impacted directly along that proposed route, and not even the portion of the Athabasca and the people of Fort Chipewyan, and their protection of their boreal forests, and the long work that they've been doing since, about 26 years now, on raising awareness of the tar sands, and where all of those pipes are coming from, and how that is not just in this fight, and so, yeah, if that answers it.
Thanks, Miranda. And I've just noticed that some folks are starting to tune out for the end of the evening. So we will have a bit more time to ask questions, but before folks leave, I do want to just reiterate what our call to action is. So how you can help the land action that's taking place, and how you can help stop the pipeline. And we have a few things going on right now consecutively, so you have an opportunity to pick and choose what suits you best in this moment. First and foremost, as Miranda mentioned, we do have a GoFundMe right now where we are fundraising to film a documentary which centers Indigenous people along the pipeline route. those directly impacted and those who don't normally get to have their voices heard in this process of deciding if a pipeline is going to be built or not. And so we really want to amplify those voices and make sure that the people directly impacted get to participate in this discussion. So the GoFundMe link, Heather, if you could pop it in the chat again, and maybe just in the Facebook page, we'll also send that around in our email with all of the links that we're going to share with you. Another action that's taking place right now is we are creating a quilt, which we can use in ceremony and which we can use in land-based direct action. So the quilt is a creative project where participants can create a 1-inch by 1-inch square. Anything that can be sewn into a quilt, any sort of fabric works great. You can embroider it, you can bead it, you can paint on it, whatever creative expression that you choose. It's really about putting your energy and your prayer into that piece of fabric so that we can all come together in this time where, because of COVID, there are some restrictions to people's health. So, so we want to create an opportunity for people far and wide to be here in presence, if not in person. So you can mail that to us. Miranda's PO box number, if you're interested in participating, you can just email secwepemcfire@gmail.com and we can send you the mailing address. And last but not least, we also have court dates coming up. So Miranda was arrested fighting for clean water and fighting for salmon and fighting for the health of the women on her territory. Also, Romley was arrested. Miranda's father was arrested. Another Secwepemc woman, April Dick, Billy Pierre as well was arrested. She's from the neighboring territory, and also the pipeline crosses through her territory. And so there are many people that are literally sacrificing their bodies and showing up within a system of colonial law to defend their rights and title. And that is an incredible sacrifice. And I think the least that we can do is to show support. If we're at the point where we can gather physically at the courthouse, it will be in Vancouver in the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. But if not, you can also tune in online. Like Michael said, this work can be really exhausting, and often just showing up virtually can actually go a really long way in providing your energy and showing that you're standing with the Indigenous people. But also, I think something that Gua said that was really powerful is that it's not just you that's showing up, it's you and all of your ancestors as well. And so that is an incredible gift. So please tune in, and you can follow on the We the Secwepemc Facebook page, as well as the R.I.S.E Now Instagram page. So that's like an @ symbol, R.I.S.E.N.O.W. And with that, we can do, sorry, the size of the square is 10 inch by 10 inch, not 1 inch by 1 inch. Thank you for the clarification of that, Romley. Yeah, and we do have an event page on the We the Secwepemc Facebook page, so you can get a little bit more details about what's available. And if you are an artist yourself and you want to lead a community Zoom call or webinar to get folks together to create at the same time, that would be really amazing. We would really love that. I'll just skim through here and see if I can find any more questions. Beautiful. There's a message from George Kirby that says, much respect to all beautiful human beings protecting Mother Earth. And then there's a word here I don't know how to pronounce. Collective title, could your nation file a lawsuit for past, present trespass, theft, willful damage caused by the assumed jurisdiction of Canada on unceded territories? the question, I think maybe, so yeah, so just to reiterate, the question is that could the nation file a lawsuit for past or present trespass? Do you want to take that one, Michael?
Yep. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
so the answer is yes. That's the easy answer. But the reality is the amount of money and time and manpower that it would take to do something like that. The government doesn't have to do anything until the Crown tells them they have to do it through a judge. And that's why we have an injunction in place across British Columbia, because the Crown is specifically interested in protecting this pipeline. And I mean, other things too, but the biggest thing here is that if we take them to court, it's going to cost us a lot of money. It costs the government millions and millions of dollars to fight us in court. It costs us millions of dollars to fight them in court. And I can never understand what makes sense about it all, other than the fact that colonization makes sense. So in British Columbia, everything is under the Crown. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the importance of the Crown stepping into this jurisdiction? It's a Crown corporation protected by Crown judge, by the Queen's Bench, by the Privy Council. And even right now, the Justice Department of British Columbia is hanging in limbo. So I would say that it's an incredibly difficult task. We could do it, I could do it, me and Miranda could do it, all of us could do it. But a lot of people have just disappeared, died. They've been a little bit about what Miranda said, like I can barely be around in my nation all the time now because I public enemy number at least top 10. So it seems like when you do this work, you're going to put a lot on the line. And I couldn't give you a shorter answer than that, because you have to understand it's going to take everything you got. It takes us everything that we got. Going against a mine was different than going against an oil and gas pipeline. So past infringements is the only money that we should ever be talking about in our territories. We should never be talking about new money from Kinder Morgan. We shouldn't be talking about it from TMX. That money should be coming from past infringements. So everything that they did for the past hundreds of years should be paid out. So that also should answer that question, but they don't have to do it if the Crown doesn't tell them they have to do it. And the Crown can only right now tell them to do it through the Lieutenant Governor General, the Governor General of Canada, or through a court. So it's an incredibly difficult situation we're in, but that's my answer.
Thank you, Michael. There is a really great article that just came out recently in regards to what's taking place at 1492 Landback Lane with the Haudenosaunee, talking about court injunctions and the use of court injunctions as a colonial tool to, excuse me, criminalize Indigenous people on their own land. And one of the things that really stood out to me in that article was that the success rates of Indigenous people winning against court injunctions or gaining court injunctions for their own legal rights and title assertment is only 18%. So the odds are really stacked against Indigenous people, of course, as we know. But the other thing that was really interesting was that in the 18% of the times where it was successful that Indigenous peoples were able to beat the court injunction process, it was because there was already a lands title court case before the courts. So the power of that, of that court process through the colonial system is so circular and problematic, because all of that money and that energy and of that time goes into funding the colonial system that is causing genocide. And so we can see why people don't want to participate in that system. But at the same time, it can also be participating in that system can be what works within the colonial courts to defend or to fight against court injunctions. So it's a very complicated and twisted and broken system for sure. But yeah, it's a really good question. What was that?
It's the complication of the century, people. As long as the land question exists, the government is scared. Please just understand, they are so afraid. Not because we're bad people, but what if we were to be bad people to take over our land? I think they're afraid that we would do the same thing to them that they've done to us. But I know that that's not the case. We're not.
This question's from Heather. Heather asks, I read about various indigenous movements that are asserting land rights and traditional laws outside of state negotiations due to the nature of the state always prioritizing capitalistic needs. Do you think the rejection of TMX can be engaged in this way? Or do you believe it's required / necessary to engage in negotiations with the state grounded in Secwepemc laws?
I could answer that one.
Go for it.
Well, the key word would be negotiations, right? So under that, there's only 3 avenues of approach under that portion. 1, we get what we want. 2, they get what they want. Or 3, that we all get what we want. But in that portion, they would have to recognize that either one of us would have to lose, or that all 3 of us would eventually win under that portion under negotiation. So I don't think that would actually really help the people, mainly because they won't recognize that we even exist here on Secwepemc territory, and not just us as the people, but all throughout so-called Canada. So yes, those talks and discussions then are left to the negotiating tables of whom? The elected chiefs and councils who self-appoint themselves in these positions under corporations and boards and sit behind the shareholders portion. So I don't have any faith that that would be a way or a venue for the Secwepemc people, mainly because, like I stated, that we can't sign, cede or surrender our territories, that belongs to the children. So we will always say no. And so majority of the output that we have is to say that we, the Secwepemc people, say no to Trans Mountain Pipeline. And so unless that's going to be a valid portion and discussed, like I said, the negotiation portion would be that we actually are taken at face value and stated we keep saying no, then Canada then has to recognize that portion that we still are here in existence. And then the portion of having to then almost like the repayment back to the people. Now, that may look different to everyone throughout Secwepemc territory, but to me, myself and my family, it would be to return the land back the way it was originally found. And so I guess that if that answers the portion of what the Secwepemc people are willing to discuss or take upon ourselves, and yeah, the portion of recognition and recognizing the Secwepemc people would have to be there, and then all of those things that we talked about, displacement, the murdered and missing Indigenous women, giving that whole portion of how in care of the people as the Secwepemc people are taking care of that within our own nation, and then taking care of saying that in care of Mother Earth, we will always say no to any proposed mining or forestry extraction, highways, anything. It, like I said, it's up to the children, it's up to their future, and we can't say yes to any of these proposed projects. So if that answers that portion.
Thank you, Miranda.
Can I just?
Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to add on to that too. Like one of the reasons why we're in the middle of all of this right now is because a lot, like, and I'll say this on my own behalf. I was on the tribal council. I was on a council of chiefs with 9 other chiefs. I was the only one who wasn't a chief under the Indian Act elected system in my life. And so this is from my own experience. I've been at the table with Western negotiators under the Trudeau government who want to, they want to call our people in and they want to sign agreements, but they want to get to a yes on the majority of these industry projects. And they know that the majority of our laws and our people say no to this all the time. And I'm just sharing from my experience at the table that a lot of these people, first of all, some of them, they're doing the best with what they've got. Some of them have inherited some of the decisions of the people made before them. But others are making these decisions right now, and they don't want the grassroots to be involved. Like I said, Trans Mountain, Kinder Morgan at the time was at the table, and it just disappeared. And it doesn't just, things like that don't just disappear. It's a concerted effort of individuals to make sure that it's not reviewed by the community and that nobody talks about it ever again. And a lot of the people who were involved have moved on or been marginalized internally and externally. So that's just an example of what we go through when the negotiations happen. They want us to say yes no matter what, and that's not fair. And I just want to share what's happening at the Chiefs table and what's happening with the Indian Act elected band officials. They know that they're Indian Act representatives. They know under the Indian Act they are responsible and accountable to the minister. And any one of you can look that up right now. You can go into the Act. It says pretty much the first thing it says in the Act is that our chief and councils are accountable to the minister. So if our prime minister was accountable only to the Queen, we'd probably have a problem with that. So that's my answer too. So, and just to lift up Miranda's words, because I think what she's talking about is really important, but I also want people to see the other side of that. Most councils aren't interested in working with our people.
Thank you. We didn't really talk too much about band council in the presentation, so that's really useful context. Thanks, Michael. Another question here. Are these court trials a way to shine light on this genocide and make real change? Who wants to take that one?
Sorry. The deputy prosecutor for the International Criminal Court is Canada. So his term will run out in the next year or so. I'm not exactly sure, but as long as Canada's the deputy prosecutor at the International Court, we're going to have a serious problem. But the International Court, when the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry came out a few months ago and stated that this was a genocide, and the Prime Minister admitted that this was a genocide, that was really high level knowledge, and that should have immediately triggered the International Criminal Court to start a case against Canada for genocide. And I mean, it hasn't, obviously, so this is where we're at.
Yeah, thank you. Miranda, is there anything you want to add to that?
Let's see. Okay. Well, yeah, it just, yeah, it would prove then what we were talking about earlier was just the portion of proof, right? So then what side of that portion will you be on, you know? So then again, it is left then to the Indigenous people to, you know, kind of navigate their own ways. And like we talked about before was like the portion of having to do land title or claims assertion, all of those things are then left to the people again. And so, yeah, the courts, I don't have any faith in the court structure and system. I'd rather be an Indigenous person living free of all of that bureaucracy and having to then prove that I'm in existence here within our own territory is kind of tiring after a while. We just want to live, you know, and if we could just have clean water, adequate housing, basic human rights portion, and basic, I'm talking very basic, minimal, then we would be okay. But yeah, in a just world, that would be the ideal portion. But yeah, the parts of genocide, yes, all of those things we've talked about are all of that. And under international law, yes, you can be brought to the Hague under acts of genocide, and then that's tiring as well. So, you know, without all of that being said, first off, you'd have to then prove your side against their side. So it's always like the proof of existence, right? So, you know, most of our portions, the only way to enact some of those portions is to get arrested. Like, we don't have the time, we don't have the people to be like, okay, yeah, you're going to get arrested to prove your title to the land and assertion. You know, it gets tiring after a while is what I'm saying. So having to do the portion of proof, you know, of existence for Indigenous people it's very tiring, you know, is to not just the acts of genocide against our people, but then going into court and having to prove our existence, and then the portion of how we live our lives on our land, and how we govern our own selves and our people. So yeah, if that answers it.
Thanks, Miranda. Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that there's like some merit to it for sure in some ways, but it's just the cards are so stacked against you, and you know, we all want to live our lives, right? Like, I mean, every person just wants to live their life in peace, and it's a lot of work. I think about too, you know, the fact that Gua, when she went to court, she chose to self-represent, because to have a lawyer be legally called to the bar in Canada, they have to swear allegiance to the Queen. And so to have the person who's representing you in the court system also be swearing allegiance to the Queen, and this is totally jurisdictional claims that we're arguing in the court, and just how stacked that feels, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So we are nearing the top of the hour. Or is there anything you wanted to add there, Miranda? No, okay. We're nearing the top of the hour. And so I'll just reiterate again, folks can donate to the GoFundMe. They can contribute to a square 10-inch by 10-inch patch for a quilt, and or they can participate in the January 20th court date, either in person or through live stream, or you can do all three, which would be amazing. We really appreciate all your support and attention. And thank you for sticking with us to the end, for those of you who did. Is there any final words you want to say, Miranda or Michael, before we sign off for the evening?
I'll just say thank you. And I get like, I'm really like a brain on this work, so I can get really in my head. Like, I'm exhausted too, and I don't want to do this work anymore, honestly. I don't think any of us do. My dad did it his whole life. And the honest answer, if, you know, and this is probably really hard for people, but, you know, non-Indigenous people got to do the work too. There's got to be a way you can hold your government accountable for what they're doing to us. And I just ask you, that's what I leave you with, is find a way, find a way. There's always a way. There's a lot of people suffering in this country, and there's always a way to help. So thank you for your time tonight, and Skeetchestn.
Yeah, Cúicshann, Mike. Cúicshann, everyone, for all of the hard work that's gone on this far. It's really up to everybody then, you know, like we talked about, it then is left to all these avenues that we've basically laid out under environmental, you know, we've talked about governmental structures, basically everything right down to the agreements that were signed on and you know, shareholders, investors, that whole structure of how it is all broken down and what we could do from there now. And so, yeah, proof of our existence here. Yes, we're still here. We're the Secwepemc people. We're not going anywhere. And so, you know, all of our portions of having to, you know, say thank you, be grateful, and being here within, you know, within Secwepemcúĺecw and taking care of our duties and our responsibilities then to our children and to the land and to Mother Earth and being grateful. If anything's showed us this far, it is that we are grateful to be here. We're grateful for our friends and our family who still care for all of this same things that we've been talking about for a very long time. And so I say thanks for all of the new people who've joined us, and the youth of this generation with technology is amazing. You know, we've had so many youth that have Instagram and are concerned about this under a bigger platform of followers, you know, so it's all of the work that we've done this far. We wouldn't have gotten this far if it wasn't for everybody who's been involved this far. So I think thanks to everyone for coming and joining us in our fight against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and also all of the work on the land and everything that's gone into the basically the assistance of, you know, Romley and Heather and R.I.S.E and numerous people who've supported by coming just to the camp itself and come to our nation and learning the ways of our people, as in the knowledge that it takes to uphold our duties and responsibilities and to the nation. So the learning portion, it takes a lot of time, but then, you know, very quick learners, as our friends have proven themselves to do all of the work, you know, in getting us more people involved. So yeah, again, thank you for all of the hard work this far, and yeah, keep following us, and we'll keep on with the new updates and the portion of asking for direct action. Like we stated, there's so many endless possibilities of what that looks like, and to everyone that's totally different, you know. So we've done it in hundreds of different ways of showing the people how we could say no, and we'll keep on doing that. And so the portion of care for all of the people who've resisted this far, and for our relatives who are protecting, using their bodies actually out on the ground and actually being arrested. I thank you for all of the hard work you've done this far, for all of the people in care of this resistance work. So there's numerous people, like so many people who've done solidarity actions. They've done, you know, being out by campfires and taking care of those fires for the people. So just gratitude and giving thanks is what I have. So Cúicshann, thank you.
Last but not least, Romley, do you have any final words for the audience?
Yeah, I just want to do a shout out to all the settler community. Come on, people. Don't leave the Indigenous people doing all the heavy lifting after hundreds of years. Come on, wake up. We have been given so much by living on their territory, by our ancestors taking over their territory against their will. Think about all your privilege. Think about everything that you've been given and help out. Like, really, it's time. Wake up. It's not that scary. Get out there. It's actually pretty fun. You'll meet some incredible people. So people who really believe in their cause, they believe in their teachings that have come down through millennia, beautiful ways of living with each other, beautiful ways of living with nature. It's actually been an incredibly healing experience just to have the honor of spending time with them. So get off your sofa, stop watching Netflix, come and have some fun. Thank you very much, Ariel, and everybody else for organizing tonight. I know you put a lot of effort into that, and I feel honored to have been involved. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night here. Bye-bye. Thank you, Heather.
Bye.